Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Chopra, welcome. Let me just begin by talking a little bit about Regulation Z. Overdraft protection helps consumers in making ends meet when a deposit account balance is low, particularly for those consumers who are unable to qualify for traditional credit products. News broke this week that the CFPB would soon be releasing its much-anticipated rulemaking on overdraft protection. When the Federal Reserve constructed Regulation Z almost 50 years ago, it intentionally excluded overdraft because it was clear that applying the Truth in Lending Act and Regulation Z to overdraft would be impractical. However, the spring 2023 Unified Agenda indicates the CFPB intends to do just that. When will this rule be published?
To be clear, that's not what the regulatory agenda says. We're looking at what the Federal Reserve did many years ago in the era of paper checks and mailing checks. We have not made any conclusions, but I am hoping we continue to get industry feedback that they'd actually like some clear rules. I don't have an exact timing on it, but I will share this. I agree with you that people need to be able to access liquidity, with respect to when they have a deposit account shortfall. There's lots of ways we're looking to address that. And in fact, borrowing is really how families and businesses survive. So I do want to assure you, there is not an effort to eliminate or make that need not able to be fulfilled.
So
but
at
again,
this
we
point,
have not proposed a rule yet.
There is not a rule that you're anticipating releasing with regard to.
Well, we are working on something, and I think what we're trying to address is a number of issues that if you look at some of our past work on this, there's certain data and enforcement work where we reached an enforcement action with Regions Bank and Wells Fargo where some of it involved moving around the payments in order to generate not one overdraft fee for the day, but sometimes 4. So we have to address the harms while still allowing consumers to be able to access the liquidity when they have a shortfall.
I guess the reason why I bring it up is number one, you've released data that indicates a major reduction of overdraft fees over the last several years. In fact, overdraft revenue in the fourth quarter of 2022 was 48% lower than overdraft revenue in the fourth quarter of 2019. It just seems to me that as a part of any study that you're doing before you release a new rule, I would hope that you would look at whether or not, if you decided to do something on it, whether or not it would actually limit access to overdraft protection if it is subject to Regulation Z's requirements and the impact that that would have on consumers. I hope that that would be included in any proposed rule that you may very well come up with.
Well, let me share with you, we actually do see quite a bit of differences between the relationship banks and the non-relationship banks. I do want to commend a lot of the banks for the industry for really starting to compete now on overdraft. Many of them are showing their lower fees or the buffers they're provided. So I agree with the spirit of everything you said, and we're continuing to work on it.
You mentioned earlier the issue of medical bills and whether or not they should be included in a report, or at least if someone is identified as not making a payment on one. As a part of your analysis, are you looking at how the healthcare industry is responding and what they're doing if the folks that normally would be the collection services for them, if they can't put that on the report? It seems to me that there's a possibility that some of those healthcare providers who have to pay their bills too may very well look at cash only or payment up front on some of those services that these folks may not be able to afford. Will that be included as a part of the analysis that you do?
So we've been talking to a lot of players in the market. There is a heterogeneity. We see a lot of places don't do reporting. We see some that do reporting. We do have very serious concerns about inaccuracy and coercion. And I think that's really a big problem, but I'm pretty sensitive to the issue you said. For what it's worth, we do see a lot of the healthcare industry already shifting to, a credit card up front. And I think that some of those are issues that are really outside the scope of the CFPB. but it's certainly something we're looking at very carefully to determine how we proceed with
Yeah,
this.
if it makes it more difficult for them to collect on a bill, some of these folks who don't want to are looking at this saying, look, if we can't get our bills paid, chances are we're going to take a different approach, and that puts a bigger burden on some folks that probably can least afford it. And I would simply hope that if you do any rulemaking on this, that you take that into account and are able to share that with this committee.
And I'm happy to discuss with you further
All right.
because we want to get it right.
Thank you, sir.